Okay, so the reason that I told you guys all this stuff about data types is because in order to make a program, you're going to have to be able to store information. And a piece of information has to have two qualities associated with it. First, it has to have the type of information, and that was the data types that I was going over earlier. And the next is just a name. And naming these pieces of information in C++ programming does have some rules to it, but I'm going to go over those in just a second. First, you just need to know that what these pieces of information are called are variables. So just like if you've ever taken like a high school algebra class, um, a letter or just sort of something that's not necessarily a number can have a value associated with it. Like say if I was to say x equals 3, then wherever you see x, you would use the value 3. So you can do that in programming a lot to some very interesting extents. So I'm gonna show you an example of that here. So if I write the word int, because this is the first thing you write when you're declaring a variable, and this is what you have to do in order to tell your program that there are going to be variables in it, like say x or a, b, c. You have to first write the data type. So this just means x is going to have a value associated with it that can be, a negative number, or 0, or a positive number. So let's name this variable number. You can name it anything you want. It can be more than one letter. It can be just one letter. I could name it n if I wanted to. But I'm gonna tell you a few rules here right now. The name of your variable must it must not start with a number. Like I could not say 2 number. That would not be a correct variable because the program might think that it's a 2. It's a value. It's not right. Next, your name cannot have spaces in it. I could not do something like this because it would think it would be int nu, and then it would have no idea what to do with this right here. You can, however, in lieu of spaces, make underscores. So if I was going to say, like say number of something, like number of test scores. Okay. I could hold the number of test scores. This is a very, very long name. You're probably going to keep your names a bit shorter, but that would work. That would be a totally valid variable name. Something else you would have to keep in mind is that C++ is very much so case sensitive. So if I was to write number with a capital N down here, and later on I was to make some kind of reference to number and I wrote it like this, that wouldn't be the same thing. These would be totally different things because this is a capital N and this is a lowercase n. Now, something else to keep in mind with these variables is that you should initialize them. And what I mean when I say initialize is that when C++ sees that I am declaring an integer number and just an integer and I'm naming it number, it's going to allocate some memory space to this integer, just to this variable right here. And that memory space may or may not have some information in it already. See, the thing about computers is they can have memory space that is filled with something but marked as empty, and that's considered empty memory space. So on your hard drive, there's going to be a location where this variable is stored, and that may or may not have a number in it already. And you have no idea what this number is. It might just be sort of a default, very large negative number that it might tend to be, or it might be some very large positive number, or it could be anything, really. And that's useless to us. Having a number that we have no idea what it is completely useless to us. So what we need to do, usually it's good convention to do this, sometimes it's not necessary, but it's good convention to do this, is to initialize the variable with number equals 0. So now, this number equals 0. And one more thing before we finish up this video is I'm just going to write the end line here so that this is easy. Instead of putting out text with this cout, I can also put out variables. So you notice I'm spelling it the exact same way, case sensitive and everything. I can output variables here, and now when I compile and run it, it's going to output, it should just read 0. I'm going to make sure this is going to work and everything. Hang on. There we go. You see on our command window, it just outputs 0. Now if I were to say make it another number like 500, I compile and run it, and it will output 500. So this is how variables work. And you see, I couldn't just write the word, I couldn't just write the number. Actually, I'm not sure if I could just write the number 500, but I could write 500 in brackets like this, and it would also output 500. And I could also output it as the variable by writing the word number and having number set to 500 up here. Variable declarations also have to have a semicolon after them. One additional piece of information, the last thing before we wrap up this video, and you can kind of absorb variables for a little while, I can declare multiple variables by just saying the data type once. So if I say int number sum amount, just 3 random variable names, there are 3 variables that have the integer data type. And something else to keep in mind is I have to initialize each of these individually. So I'd have to write number equals 0, sum equals 0, amount equals 0. I have to initialize them individually if I initialize them. I can initialize them later on, like say if I didn't initialize amount up here, I could write it like down here, making sure to add a semicolon. And so that's basically variables. I can declare multiple variables here, and they can be the integer data type, they can be a different data type, like say doubles if they're going to be doubles or floats if they're going to be decimals, integers if they're just going to be whole numbers. And I can use them down here in cout like this, or I'm going to show you mathematical operators in a second, and you can use variables like that.